Hey, family, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight for a special African ancestry presentation. Today has been designated by the National Human Genome Research Institute as National DNA Day. We've been leading up to it all month, and here we are. National DNA Day is a global movement to mobilize, energize, and empower communities, educators, and students to innovate, collaborate, and discover the promise of our shared humanity and connection to the natural world. But you know how we do. This is AfricanAncestry.com. We're putting our spin on it. We're going to talk about it from an all Black everything perspective. We have four leading geneticists at the forefront of conducting genetic research related to people of African descent. So tonight's discussion will center on precision medicine, what it is, and how it impacts Black people. I'm so happy to see you all. Welcome. Come on in and join us for what promises to be an informative and frank conversation among family about precision medicine. You know, tonight's moderator is African Ancestry's own scientific director and co-founder, Dr. Rick Kittles. Welcome, Rick.
Hey, what's up?
Hey.
Happy to be here again. Happy to be here. Looks like I'm being a regular on this show now. Huh?
The people have spoken and you are listening. So welcome. I'm glad to have you anytime. And we're here for another important conversation about our genetics. You all show some love for Dr. Kittles in the chat with the DNA strand. Let him know that we want him to keep coming back. Rick, you know, this month we launched our series of programming that educates the African ancestry family about the role that genetics plays in our health and well-being as Black folks. And you had a great conversation with Dr. Jabril Johnson about his prostate cancer research, and we're still getting a lot of comments about that.
Yep, that was fun. That was fun, and I think that he was excited to be a part of this, endeavor, and I think a lot of folks in the community learned a lot. So.
Yeah. Shout out to Jabril Johnson. So look, Rick, I'm gonna leave it to you and the experts to unpack this very important topic. Thank you for bringing your colleagues together to educate us.
All right. Thank you, Gina, or Dr. Page. So today we're going to talk about precision medicine, and I had to bring in some heavy hitters who I've known for a while, and who have been growing in this space as scientists, and I have enormous respect for each and every one of them. So tonight we have Dr. Melissa Davis, Dr. Altovise Ewing, and Dr. Sean Kimbro joining me in this conversation around precision medicine. So welcome, everyone. How's everybody?
How are you today?
Thank you.
All right. So as I said before, we're just, we're going to talk to family about some issues that a lot of times family doesn't necessarily talk about, especially when one talks about, genetics and the role of genetics in health. And in many cases, for many Black families, we don't even know our family history for a lot of diseases. And so, when we start talking about precision medicine, it gets even more confusing or convoluted. So, but before we get really into this issue around precision medicine, I want to ask the ladies first. Just give us a little background on yourself, just a couple of minutes, 1 or 2 minutes, on terms of how you got here to where you are today.
Okay,
Melissa,
I'll go first.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. It all started back in the late 1900s when Willie Green met Wilma Davis. I'm the granddaughter of a sharecropper from South Georgia. I followed my mom's footsteps for higher education, where I'm the first generation Ph.D. And I started out at an HBCU, Albany State in Albany, Georgia, Albany. And I initially started out wanting to be a clinician, but dramatically my path changed when I had my first research opportunity experience at the Ohio State University. And from there, I went to grad school to get my Ph.D. in molecular genetics. I did some postdoctoral training at Yale and UChicago in functional genomics and systems biology. At UChicago, Fumio Lopate introduced me to interdisciplinary health disparities in breast cancer, as well as to you, Dr. Rick Kittles. And then I finished up some of my training with cancer disparities training at MD Anderson with Lovell Jones. My first faculty appointment was at UGA. Had a brief stint at Henry Ford Health Systems where I partnered with the incomparable Lisa Newman, and we moved to Weill Cornell in 2018, where she serves as chief of breast oncology at Weill Cornell, and I am the scientific director of the International Breast Cancer Center that she founded over 15 years ago. So that's how I got here.
That's your journey. That's your journey. You're going to stick with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Altovise, you want to share with us?
Yes. And thank you, Dr. Davis, for sharing. I loved hearing your story. For me, it really started with my fondness for family history, as well as recognizing the power of family health history. For me, I recall sitting in my college genetics course, learning about the fact that the human genome had been sequenced a few years prior. And one day a genetic counselor walked into our class and she really gave us the ins and outs of her profession and what she did day to day. And for me, I instantly fell in love. I saw it as an opportunity to meld my love for people, my love to really engage people in sharing information about their family health history, and really equipping them with tools and resources to help them make informed health decisions, which at the time for me, I felt selfish because I realized I can combine my love for my family and my love for family health history, and I may have an opportunity to keep my loved ones here a lot longer. That's what I thought selfishly at the time. But now I actually feel like that's a rather selfless way of thinking, to recognize that you can help people make informed decisions and make lifelong and life-changing decisions. So for me, I instantly recognized that genetic counseling was going to be part of my career path. At the time, I had actually already committed to Teach for America. So I taught 2 years in the middle school setting. And I always say that I recognized during that 2-year tenure that teaching at the middle school level was not my calling, but I felt that teaching in another capacity was my calling. And I thought that capacity was genetic counseling. And for me, when it came time to decide where to go for my genetic counseling program, all roads led to Howard University. It aligned with what I believe to be my purpose, to help people who look like me, to equip us with resources. It aligned with my passion to give back to my community. And the community was at the core of everything that we did. So I actually started on a genetic counseling track at Howard University. But the same thing that led me to genetic counseling is actually the same thing that had me stay at Howard beyond my genetic counseling degree, and actually motivated me to pursue my PhD. I recognized or made a lot of observations in clinic that women who looked like me, women who were young and oftentimes diagnosed with cancer, they were not being offered genetic testing at the same rate that white women were at the time. And I wanted to stay at Howard. I wanted to pursue my PhD and ask the questions that no one else was asking at the time, to come up with the answers for my people and for my community. And fast forward 10 years later, I am currently working at Genentech. I'm one of the senior science leads on our global health equity and population science team, and just really excited to say, or really to know, that when I started my training at Howard University, roles like this did not exist. But it's just so affirming to know that everything that I started at Howard University, all of that training really prepared me for this moment and where I am today.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. Sean, you want to share a little bit about your journey and maybe discuss a tiny bit about this transformative R01 that you received at NCCU?
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. This is nice. I enjoyed the opportunity to get on with a bunch of brothers and sisters and have that conversation. I really have started research when I was 16 years old. So this is the only thing I knew. My first grant I actually got was for $462 from the Gem City Medical Association in Dayton, Ohio. And I remember going there, asking them for some money, and they said right there, here, man, I just gave you some cash. And I started that track. Went from there to Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, WashU, and then went into Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, studying microbiology and molecular biology, and then went to Harvard to do actually bone biology. So I hadn't even got to the genetics aspect of my interest until I got to my first, well, then I went from Harvard Med to National Institutes of Health at NIEHS, National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences, looking at estrogen. And there started to kick in this idea of estrogen and this triple negative breast cancer that comes up a lot. And went from there to Clark Atlanta University. Went there for a little while and assistant professor, then went to Emory University and was the program director for their health disparities research. I guess the Cancer Health Disparities Research Institute there that was funded by NIH. And then from there came to North Carolina Central University, where I'm working. I came as director of the institute there, the Julius L. Chambers Biomedical Biotechnology Research Institute. Got funded and decided to go back to the lab and have essentially been always exploring this idea of the biology of health disparities and how does that, what is that? What does that mean to look at the biology, not just the social and behavioral piece, but to combine them all? And so taking that and kind of twisted that into the grant that I currently have, which is Transformative R01, and is geared around a general hypothesis that Black folks, that folks from African descent are just out of context here in the United States, and that out of context has a play. And we apply some of that theory into developing new drugs or targeting new drugs and for drug development. So that's been kind of my love and passion for this. I teach graduate and undergraduate classes here at North Carolina Central University. Enjoy that impact. I'm a product of a PWI, but a contributor and participant in the training of African-American students at a HBCU.
All right, thanks. That was, hearing all three of those stories, and I know your stories because I know you guys, but hearing it again is definitely, it's fulfilling with me because, we all have our own sort of journey, and I think what's important to understand is that, folks paved the way before us, right? And with that, we have a responsibility for those who come in behind us. So I love hearing that. So tonight's topic is all about precision medicine. And so I want each and every one of you to give me your own definition of what precision medicine is, because it does vary a little bit, but I think there's some consistency here. I think we will all converge on this definition. And then let's talk about why it's so important for African Americans, potentially. We'll start with you. We'll start with you, Sean. They took Sean out. Melissa, you can start. I'm sorry.
Okay. So I work at a precision medicine institute, and one of the things we focus on is how to define across patients, specifically for each patient, what is driving, for instance, their particular tumor growth. And then we target that particular thing about this patient, for their treatment. And so precision medicine to me is just what it sounds like. It's medicine that is tailored for an individual patient or patient group based on some aspect of the disease or an understanding of what caused the disease or why people typically don't respond to a general therapy. General therapy being something like systemic chemo in cancer, where it's just killing everything that's dividing, as opposed to precision, which is specifically targeting the tumor cells. And and that's targeted therapy, but then precision targeted therapy is that there's something unique in the combination of what we treat you with that specifically targets what is unique to your disease.
So why do you think this is important for Black people? understand and to
Oh my gosh.
participate.
There's so many reasons, right? I mean, everybody else gave like their real story about how they became a geneticist, but the reality is, I have a little militant side to me. I had to do a project on genetics, and when I saw the literature, I saw that all the stuff that was being found related to African Americans was so negative. There's a gene for criminal behavior, or a gene for psychoses, or weaknesses and vulnerabilities that were being exploited because there was no representation of us in the field. So I think it's important, because I don't think that not only should we not be left behind, but it shouldn't be only for negative purposes. So I think it's really important for people of African descent, because we are a unique people. Like there's no other population on the planet like the African diaspora,
Right.
especially admixed African Americans. And so I think it's really important
Mhm.
that we really understand the underlying biology of our diseases, all of them. Okay, we focus on cancer, but
Yeah.
anything that has a genetic basis should be redefined
Right.
specifically to this population, so that we get the type of treatment that will work for us, right? It's not just getting access to the hospital. It's that when you get to the hospital, there's something there that's going to actually work for you,
Right.
and that you'll survive the treatment of what's available.
All right. Thanks. Altovise, you want to answer those two questions?
Yes, thank you. So for me, I think precision medicine has evolved for me to actually reflect more so precision public health, or even personalized healthcare. And I think I've realized that precision medicine goes beyond just providing the right treatment, the right dose to the patient at the right time, but we also have to provide the right recommendations. We have to provide the right screening recommendations, the right therapeutic interventions to patients and populations at the right time as well. And in addition to that, we also have to conduct the right research. And by that, I mean that we have to conduct research that is inclusive of underrepresented populations, inclusive of understudied populations. And we have to ask the right questions. Again, there are questions that some people have asked their entire careers, and it's benefited the same populations over and over again. And oftentimes, people who have received the grant funding from at the governmental level and even at the private level, they oftentimes ask the questions that constantly benefit people of European ancestry. And unfortunately, those results are not generalizable. They're not relevant all the time to people who look like us.
Right.
So it's very important that we go beyond just looking at medicine, looking solely at treatment, and we focus on screening, and we focus on the research that's being conducted as well. And then why is this important for Black people? Dr. Kittles, you opened this session with something that resonates with me, and something that I say almost every single day is that family health history should not be a mystery.
Right.
And in order for us to successfully deliver on the promise of personalized healthcare, precision medicine, precision public health for all people, I really think it starts with having that conversation about your family health history, having that conversation about the conditions that run through the family, having those uncomfortable conversations, but realizing that your temporary discomfort may actually help some of your family members live longer and better quality lives, because it may open the door to a wealth of opportunities and informed decisions to help them pursue precise and personalized healthcare options. So that's what personalized healthcare and precision medicine mean to me, and why it's important for Black people.
All right, thanks. Family history should not be a mystery. I like that.
I like it too.
We're going to use that one. So where is Sean? Did he disappear? Oh, man. Okay, well, maybe Sean, maybe there's a outage over there. The great thing about these virtual setups is we can, be anywhere, but at the same time, it's all technology driven. So all right, so let's get into this next phase. So we talked about precision medicine. We talked about why it's important to African Americans, but let's talk about this whole issue of health disparities, because that came up several times. And we all know that health disparities are diseases that disproportionately impact in terms of incidence or outcomes, poor outcomes, like mortality, disproportionately impact one population versus another. And what we find is that when we look at these major chronic diseases, it's communities of color, African Americans, Hispanic, Latino, and Native American populations that are more vulnerable to many of these diseases. And then they also have worse outcomes and a higher impact in terms of the impact on the population. What do you think is driving health disparities? What do you think is driving that? What are the big factors you think that is the reason why African Americans are dying of stroke? Why do you think that the African Americans are getting prostate cancer or triple negative breast cancer in the numbers that we are? Just any idea sort of in terms of the major contributors? Melissa, you would say?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I think there are a lot of reasons. And I think that one of the main ones is, like we just said, we don't really understand all of the risk around some of the diseases, but disparities is a large component of it. It has to do with, racism and discrimination, and the translation of that, living a lifetime being weathered down by oppression and marginalization, and then limited access to what you need to be healthy, limited access to what you need to cure something that's curable. All of those things, I think, together feed into why we see disparities in our population.
I definitely agree, Dr. Davis. I think about that gene by environment formula that really increases the Black population's risk for various conditions. But I also think one of the contributing factors is, again, the fact that our population has been severely understudied, and historically science has not asked the questions to really get at the root of understanding some of the reasons or some of the factors that contribute to our diseases and why disparities exist. So that's a function of the system that has been built that was not built to benefit people who look like us. And unfortunately, what is standard today does not benefit us. So I really think it's going to require a complete disruption of the system. And I think we are in a movement now where we are gradually disrupting some of those systemic inequities and practices that are in place. But I think that is what we're definitely going to have to ensure that we contribute our energy, our motivation to, in order to really arrive at equity for all populations.
So yeah, I agree. I want to add, though, you just brought up a great point about the system, right? And we saw this firsthand with COVID. The deprioritization of certain parts of the general population. I think that is certainly a root to just about everything, right? When we think about research and what the populations that research has been focused on, and so then the clinical tools that are available are really great for that population, but don't really translate as well to us.
Yep, absolutely.
So let me ask another question, and I hate these sorts of questions because I remember I was in one of those big disparities meeting in Houston, Lovell Jones's meeting, and I was on a panel and somebody asked this question, and I was, I hate this question, but I'm going to ask it.
No,
anyway.
Thank you.
Are you going to answer the question?
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I think I'm at a point where I can ask it. I don't have to answer it, right? But so all right. So if you woke up tomorrow and you had sort of this magic wand or this whatever ability to change certain things, what would be the top 3 things you would change that would impact health disparities? What would be the top 3?
I would give power to the people. I would probably democratize some things that are right now kind of in the hands of, gatekeepers. But I have to think more carefully about that, Dr. Kittles. That's a huge question. I think.
If you think about what the list of determinants of disparities are, then you could say, okay, well, these are the top three, and I'd wave my wand, and these three would go away, right? You just said she just said you said you would remove some of those systemic barriers, right? What you're talking about is healthcare access, right? So so the question is, if we were to set up a healthcare for all for free, do you think that would reduce disparities?
I think it would reduce disparities, but access is not the same as equity. So I'm going to be complicated with my first wish, right? It's going to be not only access, but equity. Like, I would change the system, in a way that also influences those providers within the system to use evidence to ensure that what is being delivered is equitable for everybody who needs care.
Okay. What about you, Altovise?
So I'm trying to come up with 3 I's. So innovation, integration, and implementation. And for the innovation, I would focus on, again, the research questions that we are asking, as well as who are we funding to conduct the research as well.
There it is.
We need more people from underrepresented groups to conduct the science, and we need to partner with the groups that are underrepresented and understudied as well. So those partnerships are going to be key. So that would be my one for innovation. For integration, I think I would take that to the clinic, and I think about some of the clinical data that we are collecting today, some of the questions on our clinical profiles that we complete when we go to see our doctor. And I do not think all of those questions are relevant to understudied and underrepresented populations. I think we actually need to expand that list, and we need to ask more questions around social determinants of health and about determinants of health in general. That way we can better understand our story, better understand the stories of populations that are constantly medically underserved. So that's my integration. And then lastly, implementation. And I'm biased. I would probably quadruple the number of genetic counselors from underrepresented populations. I definitely want to see an increase, because at the end of the day, we are the ones who translate this complex genetics language into a language that our community understands and into a language that our community speaks. And I think that is going to be key for us to really see personalized healthcare and precision medicine benefit all people. So those are my 3 magic wands, and those are the 3 things that I would change.
I only said one.
All right, you got 2 more?
Well, at least have one more. I mean, it's just since she said something about science, I'm trying to keep it, simple, but I think we need to reannotate the human genome, based on more than just that one reference genome. If I could wave a wand, if money wasn't an object, I would have multiple versions of the human genome that are reannotated to really.
So you think that would reduce disparities?
Yes, I do, Dr. Kittles, because technically, like for instance, we have these gene panels that are predicated on the human reference sequence, but the truth is there could be versions of genes that we don't even know about because the way they were defined was defined in a white or European population. If we redefine the structure of genes, I mean, we know that there are expressed regions across the genome that are not represented on the human reference, but they would be if it was an African reference, right? So absolutely. So there are genes that are completely missing off the human mutation panels that will fix that if we had better references.
Better references. Okay. Well, this gets to my next question. So welcome back, Sean. I'm glad, glad you made it back. We were talking about precision medicine initially, and then we started talking about health disparities. So my next question is actually the bridge between the both of them, because some of us, I think all of us on this panel right now, firmly believe that precision medicine actually can help alleviate health disparities if organized properly and rolled out properly with access and benefit to all communities. But that's not the case. So what we know is that precision medicine is really as good as the database and the knowledge base in which it comes from.
Right.
And health disparities are going to continue to be health disparities until we get more communities of color involved in not only research around those diseases, but also advocacy for access and equity. So the question is, how do we bridge that? How do we increase participation in the community for not only research into health disparities, but also the benefits leading to benefits from precision medicine? How do we do that? Because they both have these barriers, right? There's barriers to full benefit or equitable benefits. Right now, European populations are benefiting from most of these precision medicine products, almost all of them, right? People of African descent, people of Hispanic, Latino ethnicity, they're not benefiting like these European populations. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we get communities of color more involved?
I'll step in for a minute because I've been absent for a little bit. Let me say this. I think it's about developing first a sense of trust that we as a community have lost with the medical field in general, in research. I think it's also a matter of appreciating the roles that untraditional, or not untraditional, I want to say not the usual players coming to the table. For example, I think that's important to the idea of the role of the HBCU in this effort to bridge that trust. I know that we've done that here in North Carolina, the idea that just because we are a HBCU and we are North Carolina Central, we've been able to go out to the whole state and really bridge that gap of trust. And I think when we start talking about educating the community and letting the community understand their role in this this movement toward precision medicine, I think we're going to start seeing that impact. I think on top of that, what was said earlier was the idea of introducing an appreciation for the reference sequence, that DNA sequence that we need or that is used to make that comparison with each other and with other populations. I mean, to me, appreciating the original genome, the first genome, using that as your template, to me, has always made better sense. Why would you go with some new folks to look at everybody and not just look at the old folks? Start off with the old folks first. The folks who've been here.
Talk about the original man, the original genome.
Right, the original genome, and that's what we started to do at in our lab, is kind of looking at the idea that if you look at differences, like for drug targeting, the idea of precision medicine is looking at and making a decision of your health based off of your genetics, and that provide that precision. I think you got to have that precision all the way from the beginning. And so we've used that to look at those drug targets, to identify drug targets, and then to play with those and see, can we do something different? Because a lot of the products, as you said, out there are actually designed with a Eurocentric twist. We talk about the standard protein that they might be targeting. Well, a lot of times they don't have the variants, the differences in them that really are differences that originated with us. So I'm not even sure they're differences. I think maybe the other group is the difference. But we'll stay out of that a little bit. But that idea of that targeting and addressing, most of the planet is thanks in part to, unfortunately, to enslaving Africans. Most of the planet is black and brown and other.
Right.
European.
Right. Yeah. Right. So the in terms of humanity, these populations are populations of color, and many of them are quite diverse genetically, but yet we don't have a good handle on that diversity that is that's rooted in Africa. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions from the audience from time to time. So this one question came up. H. Jackson is asking, what advice would you give a soon-to-be Ph.D. student going into the area of precision medicine who's working to be an advocate in this area? Any advice?
Well, I guess I'll jump in on that too. I think I would suggest that first you follow that passion, follow that passion first. I think, my love of asking the question or solving the puzzle was the one that led me into getting my PhD. I think by doing that, you'll allow your path already defined. I think the others can talk to about the question of the geneticist. I'm a molecular biologist by training, so I look at genes turning on and off, and you guys do a lot more of that GATC analysis than I do. But so I'm gonna let the ladies address that.
I think the advice that I would offer is for that individual to realize that you do not have to wait until you obtain your PhD to make a difference in this space. So I encourage you to read, listen to podcasts, reach out to people on LinkedIn, conduct informational interviews.
Stay away from Google. Did you say stay away from Google? Is that what you said?
I did not say that. I said connect with people on LinkedIn, and do not be afraid to have conversations with people to learn about their story. And I think that will help equip you with information. And I think it will also poise you to identify what are some of the voids in this space that you can come in and fill, and what are some of those gaps that have remained rather disparate for our community that you can come in and fill as well. I think that is the advice that I would offer to anyone who aspires to obtain their PhD, because your PhD is a degree that will help you contribute to the field, expand the research, build upon the foundation that's already been established. But that starts well before you get your PhD.
Okay, great. Melissa, you have a answer?
Sure. I would say if I were starting out with a PhD right now, I would do everything Altovise just mentioned, Dr. Altovise just mentioned, which is to stay well read. And first of all, be very open. Like graduate school is the purpose of graduate school is to give you a core set of skills and the ability to do research. And so don't feel like you're pigeonholed by whatever your thesis is. You, as a scientist, a PhD literally is a license to be a scholar in science, right? Like once you're a PhD, you can coin terms, name things that no one else knows about. Your whole business model is discovery. And so, and that's not always going to be easy, especially if you come from a marginalized background. Like our discoveries aren't always well received because of who we are. So to that, I would add resilience, as you sort of have to face those challenges. And hopefully you won't face as many as I did. And maybe I didn't face as many as Dr. Kittles did, but they're still out there.
Yeah, they're still out there. I think that's a great point, resilience. I mean, from the even getting into graduate school and then during that process, and then it's not going to go away once you get that PhD.
Nope, not at all.
I mean, it gets even harder, because then folks are like, who invited you to the table? You know what I'm saying?
Right. And who do you think you are?
Yeah. And just because you're sitting at the table doesn't mean you get to talk. You just sit there and listen.
Right. Yeah. So another question for the panel. This is a good one. What is it? Yadea Lork Wilmot. Question for the panel. How do we balance the need for precision medicine and public health when the legacy of medical apartheid informs our participation in studies to improve our health outcomes? It's a doozy. So how do we balance that? I'm sure each of you, the more I think about it, I'm sure each of you have probably already resolved that because of your career, because it's we are Black first, right? And we understand the history. But at the same time, we are also professionals in this space that we believe could help our community. So we've had to work this out in our minds. So anybody want to share?
I just don't want to go first all the time, but I think that absolutely you're right, Dr. Kittles. I mean, to some degree I had to resolve that, but then I also think that I bring to the table a bit of my personality where, I'm kind of like I feel like I'm a protector of my community. And so to that, I would say that's part of what I would tell our community is that
I got you.
we're here. Yeah, exactly. Like nothing's going to happen to you on my watch. You know, I'm not letting the IRB, you know what I mean, approve something that I think is harmful. You know what I mean? I think we have a lot of people now in the behind the scenes and in the trenches for those protections. And I would say that since the time when those atrocities were allowed, there are many, many layers now of protection.
Yeah, but
To make sure
also it
ethical
wasn't
reasons.
even without those layers though. I mean, even if we had those layers, we still didn't have representation like we do. Like you just said, we have a lot more people that are, uh, um, gatekeepers and folks that are at multiple levels, but we didn't have that back then.
Right. Exactly.
Representation is still today. Representation is very low in terms of African American, professionals in this space. But it's a lot more than what we had, in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, I think the idea of the protector and appreciating that, I teach my students and tell them that that sample, is precious and it is it is part of you. And bringing the students out into the field to collect samples. We also do some health disparities. I mean, some diabetes work. And when you get the students and engage the population, you realize that there is that trust. And it's the sense that I got you, you don't have to worry about it. And you can come back later and take your, do what you need to do. And then you see that twist sometimes, to be quite honestly with you, when you engage some of the PWIs and in the same space, and you realize, oh, they really do trust the fact that you represent them, you look like them. And because of that, there is that that trust, and it's a powerful thing to realize that, that you are responsible for the progression and the solution when it comes to addressing their problem, whether it be diabetes or cancer disparities, and looking at that. And I think I would agree. I love that term, kind of the defender. We got you. When you give us that DNA, we got it in our refrigerator. We got it. It's not going anywhere. We got it. And I think that is very critical, especially now, given the political climate.
Right. Altovise, any comments?
Yeah, I think for me, very similar to what Drs. Davis and Kimbro have said, but strategic representation came to mind for me, just how critically important it is for us to be represented, present, and actively involved at every single level as the principal investigators, as the partners in the research, as the participants in the research. And I think those bidirectional and multiple modes of communication and exchange, I think that will help us ensure that we never forget the history, that the history helps to guide and inform some of the questions that we are asking. And again, that we are asking the questions that need to be asked, and even the questions that matter to the community as well. And I think that really starts with that strategic representation and ensuring that all channels are firing and communicating with the community in mind and with health equity in mind.
Great. All right, so I want to go back to this precision medicine and what these products are, because some people are like, well, what are they talking about? I mean, precision medicine is an area where it's a discipline, really. It's an area of focus where we use genomic information, genetic DNA information, to make better clinical decisions, right? And there are many, it's a broad spectrum of products that you can use. You can do sort of risk assessment. You can do prognosis. You can even do some diagnosis using genomics. You can also look and see if this person is going to respond better to this drug than the other. So drug efficacy. So it's a very important area. But as we said before, there's not a lot of information for people of African descent in that distribution of products, right? So what do we do know? Let's say, for instance, so right now we can do a genetic test for we can look at a couple of variants in the genome of an African American and say, you will probably be darker, you will probably be light in skin color. We can do that pretty good. We can look at some variants in the genome and we could say, oh, you are more than likely as an African American to be vitamin D deficient based on your genotypes. Mm-hmm. We can go and look in the genome and say, oh, this person has a variant, has a mutation in their beta globin gene, and so they're going to be sickle cell, either trait or have the disease. We can say that, right? But there aren't much more that we can say as it relates to many of these disease risk tests. And even when we talk about, and Melissa, you chime in, sequencing tumors. So often, we look at tumors from whites and blacks and we see a different distribution of mutations in those tumors. And most of the drugs have been geared around the mutations that have been focused in the white tumors. So how do we get to, how do we resolve that?
Well, since you asked me to chime in, I mean, I'll make a plug for my own research. But I think that one of the things that we're trying to do is, for instance, and Altovise can probably speak to this, is when we look at some of the mutation panels for cancer risk, for instance, that what is actionable from a clinical standpoint or pathogenically understood. So in other words, it's a mutation that we know creates a problem in the cell and then becomes an issue of disease. So that's what I mean by pathogenic. We know those very well in certain ancestry groups because those were the patients that were studied. And so we can recognize them. For instance, in the Ashkenazi Jewish population, they're very well-known mutations that, at the sort of inception of mutation panels, almost exclusively came from that population. But when we now have more technology where we're not just looking for that specific mutation, but we're looking at all the mutations across not only the breast cancer gene, but a suite of others, when we look at those mutations from African Americans or even Latin Americans, Native Americans, the mutations that we find aren't the ones that have been studied. And so then, by way of medical liability, the doctors, the clinicians cannot take action on those mutations. They're called variants of unknown significance. Mm-hmm. And they just get brushed away. Like they don't even get reported sometimes in the medical record. We now see better report of those variants. And we now see clinical trials are more inclusive of any variant, for instance. But even that I think is dangerous. We really need to really understand what those variants are. And so that's what, for instance, we do in my lab, at least one of the projects. But, and we can come back to this later, but I think there's also tools on the forefront that are going to be even more problematic because it's not anything well understood. It's predicated upon an algorithm, which is artificial intelligence. So using these very complicated, let the computer tell us what the disease is, type of platforms, we're going to see discongruency where the ability of these algorithms to really diagnose appropriately in minority populations, and then minority populations are going to be misdiagnosed. So that's what I'm really kind of keeping an eye out on. But I think, the way to mitigate that is to be inclusive of diversity in the trials, in the research. That is the foundation of those, different tools, and require that diversity, right? It's not like you can study whatever population you want. It should be a matter of rigor. And then therefore, whether you get funded or keep funding, flowing to you will be predicated on whether you're really being equitable in your research.
Right. Any other comments?
So, go ahead. Dr. Ewing.
Well, I will be very short and sweet. Actually, Dr. Kittles, I was reflecting on the information that you shared in your question. And a lot of that information is not common knowledge. It's not common knowledge among our population. And what I would love to see but I would love to see African Ancestry and a company that truly cares about Black people, cares about communities of color, generate a product that will reveal relevant information and results for us. Because a lot of the results that are relevant for our health are relevant for us to make informed health decisions. Sometimes those variants are, as Dr. Davis mentioned, they are excluded, they are inaccurately classified, and that really does us a disservice, especially when it already took a significant level of activation energy to get us to participate, or even to get us to trust the company that built the product, and then to know that we are receiving a subpar or inequitable product. And that's why I think a company such as African Ancestry, if you can amass that information that we know will help us really benefit from precision medicine and the advancements, I think that will be a game changer.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks.
Yeah. I think what I would I want to build on what Dr. Davis was stating is, we've talked about the variance on the diagnosis and the prognosis. I think what to give a plug from the research that we do at Central is taking that idea of now you found the variant, you found the target, something that was different, and actually drugging that and having that wherewithal to go in and realize that that variant is relevant to a lot more people than just the ones that those European or Eurocentric perspective that a lot of the drugs have been designed on. So the idea of adding precision medicine, not just on the risk and the prognosis, but also in terms of the treatment. Is what do you give, and what's maybe the best treatment? Bidel is one of those drugs that was created not necessarily based off of genetics, actually, unfortunately, but it was based off of the observation. And I think here is where we kind of put it all together. You take from Dr. Davis's work and Dr. Kittles' work, and you put some of the central work together, and you say, now we've got a complete product where we can go in and make that prognosis, make that even precision nutrition. The idea that maybe some things that you need to eat may not impact you differently than your neighbor, because of genetics. And then all these pieces, this idea of that combination of not just the genetics but also the behavior in that piece, tying them together with a twist that this is about us. And it concerns maybe some of our behaviors, some of our tendencies, things that we enjoy to do. And maybe that actually kind of completes this whole story of precision medicine and the relevance to the population.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Great point. So I appreciate these comments. This is a very good discussion. I just wanted to go back a bit to what Melissa and Altovise had mentioned earlier about those that are getting funded to do this research. They don't look like us, right? And for the most part, they have contributed to the skewing of the data, right? And the inability to inform communities of color, right? So what does NIH do when they find out that we have these huge gaps? What do? They end up funding those same people who messed it up in the first place. So the challenge has and continues to be, how do we get equity as it relates to targeted funding for and research in this space for communities of color? I mean, it's something that has bothered me for years, and I was on this panel discussing the other day, and I said, because they were talking about how genomics is changing and it's so great, the technology. And I said, yeah, the technology is great and it's rapidly evolving. But, you guys are asking the same questions you were asking 50 years ago when we were doing RFLPs, restriction digest and stuff like, this technology should allow you to ask better, deeper questions. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree.
So then they kicked me off the panel. But anyway.
Really?
I don't know why I'm surprised.
but the point is, how do we move How do we move forward in this space?
You know what? I think we got to build our own. If I can just go ahead and say that, somebody in the chat actually just said what precludes us from doing our own research instead of asking for inclusivity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my closest friends who are also scientists know very well that, if money were no object, I would start a minority research institute of minority researchers studying minority populations. We see that structure work very well in Native Pacific Islanders right now. Like, there's this huge movement where Hawaiian scientists and clinicians are focused on their populations, and they're seeing government buy-in to support that research. We see this in the Native American community, whereby you can't get access to these populations unless you go and talk to the chief and the elder council, and you can't publish anything until they say that it's okay. I think that beyond that, we just have to raise our own funds, and that may take stepping outside of the norm where philanthropic donations are concerned.
Right.
Like we tend to, in PWIs, go to the typical sources of money and funding, but maybe we need to rethink how we build our own financial infrastructure to do it ourselves.
Right. Okay. Great point. Oh, Altovise, you have a comment?
So I think what I would add to that, just kind of thinking about a comprehensive strategy, I think about the panels who are the decision makers in terms of who receives grant funding and who does not. And I think historically, we've oftentimes looked to see what have they published, what is their track record. But I think we also need to evaluate their character. We need to have them complete screening profiles to really measure levels of implicit bias, levels of racism.
Yes.
And that should help us decide who should sit on this panel to make this decision and who should not sit on the panel. I want to put that as part of it.
We should write an op-ed on that right there.
I like that.
Introduce the instruments, Dr. Ewing. Let's go ahead and put it out there. I agree. I'm so serious. I'm so serious.
I agree too, but who wouldn't be invited to those study sections?
Yeah, we sure wouldn't be invited.
Everybody here.
And I'm good with that.
All right. One last question before we bring Gina back. This is from Mary Smith. Where do we find practitioners who have knowledge of precision medicine? See, that's the other piece that is going to increase the widening of disparities, is that precision medicine costs a lot of money. And the knowledge, you have to have been trained in that. All the practitioners don't know about precision medicine. Right. So it's an elite few. And then, so everybody can't get access to them. Where do we find them, those who have knowledge of precision medicine? Any answers?
Yes, I have answers. So I encourage you to go to the National Society of Genetic Counselors. There you will be able to identify individuals who are trained in clinical genetics as genetic counselors to help translate this information. And I want to put in a plug for the Minority Genetics Professional Network. There you're going to find more genetic counselors and geneticists who look like us. And who come from underrepresented and underserved populations, and who are passionate about ensuring that their communities are represented and appropriately and equitably served. So those are two organizations that I would encourage people to check out if you're looking for clinicians and practitioners who are very familiar with this content.
That's great. That's great. All right. I mean, that was perfect. I didn't think about the genetic counselors. I mean, I think about you guys all the time. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
But the point is that you guys really are carrying a big load right now.
Yeah.
In this precision medicine space. And that's why even some of the big Ivy League institutions are struggling, because they don't have enough genetic counselors.
Yes.
So think about the big Ivy League institutions, but then also the little, HBCUs or whatever. Mm-hmm. We need more genetic counselors of color. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. And I mean, just to add to what she said, and what you said, Dr. Kittles, we had a contract where Illumina was sponsoring whole genome sequencing, right? So because I'm here, I kind of hoarded my piece to be in Brooklyn. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to make sure our free whole genome sequencing went to the African Americans in Brooklyn. But then like the clinicians felt very uncomfortable about how to explain this whole genome test with pages and pages of variants and all this information. And so we had to pull in a genetic counselor, but they were in short order, short supply here. And dare I say very little in terms of representation in the community. You know what I mean? So Dr. Ewing, yes, we need to get in touch with the national.
We need to put a couple of more of these genetic counselor programs at HBCUs.
I agree.
We need to do that. I mean, that's a definite, because this is a growing space. There's a growing need, and if we're not involved in that at this stage, it's going to be hard to catch up.
Yeah. Hopefully, before I die, there will be a genetic counseling program at every historically Black college and university, and there will be a strong alliance between those colleges and universities. So that is definitely one of my dreams.
We need them, just like we need nurses, right? I mean, the new norm is going to be genetic, surgery with CRISPR-Cas9. You know what I mean? We need some more people who have a background in genetics in the clinic. Absolutely.
Right. And like I said, if we don't, then the gap is going to widen. It's sad because, and COVID, just like you said, Melissa, COVID really highlighted this, right? The prioritization or the deprioritization of certain populations, and the just the ability to just ignore them.
Right.
And that's what's going on right now with precision medicine. And because if you don't have the money or the knowledge, you're not going to participate in this. And so people think, oh well, I can get a 23andMe test or whatever, and that's going to help. That information is not built for us.
Record. Yeah.
It wasn't created for us. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And with that, I want to thank you guys for just this spectacular conversation. I'm so excited and honored that you guys all agreed to participate. I have to bring Gina Page back, Dr. Page.
Thank you for having us, Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Kittles.
Thank you.
Gina, you can turn your mic on.
I was just going to say, or I was saying, I so much appreciate you, Dr. Kittles, for convening such an incredible group of scientists that look like us. Part of the benefit of being an African ancestry family member is access to this type of information. Somebody put it in the comments, for us, by us. I'm not aware of any other ancestry testing company or any other genetics company that's having these types of conversations centered on Black people, and certainly not today on National DNA Day. So I want to thank you again for leading this conversation.
No problem.
And for spearheading our series. So coming up at the first of every month, we're going to be covering a different topic. And in the spirit of Dr. Altovise Ewing, our next conversation on Wednesday, May 4th, is going to be with Barbara Harrison. She's a genetics counselor. And so it'll be interesting to talk to her and flush out some of these things that you guys planted the seeds for in today's conversation.
I'm so excited about that. Are you going to do that, right? You're moderating that.
Oh, you're more than welcome to join us.
Oh, okay. All right. We'll figure it out. I really admire Barbara a lot. And, she was at Howard when I was there, and she's still there. So
I would love for you to be here, and I'm sure she would too. So let's see if we can make that happen. But I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. And if you are even more interested in learning about your own genetics, even if just at the ancestry level, there's lots of ways for you to get started on an African ancestry journey. You can get a MatriClan test and trace your maternal roots. Or if you're still getting to know us, you can go over to AfricanAncestry.com and check out all of our free tools. We've got a Find Your Tribe quiz. We've got a set of blog articles. And Rick, in honor of National DNA Day, we're offering 10% off any test kit today only. And we have a new limited edition royalty shirt. So hopefully you guys are going over to AfricanAncestry.com, cop the shirt, cop a DNA pin, cop a test kit, whatever it is that makes you feel good, and join the African Ancestry family. If you're watching us on the replay, put some DNA emojis in the comments to show our scientists some love. And you are welcome to join us every Wednesday at 7 p.m. for the African Ancestry Experience. And that's where we share identity-focused conversations with the African diaspora. Next Wednesday, in 2 days, Rick, we're going to be closing out the month with Mahogany Brown. She is the Lincoln Center's inaugural poet in residence. This is National Poetry Month, and she is proof that Black girls are magic. So be sure to tune in, everybody, to join us for Mahogany L. Brown. Like, share, subscribe to our YouTube.
Can't miss that.
Turn on the notifications. Do what you got to do so you can be part of this conversation. Listen, it's not every day we get Dr. Rick Kittles on here. So tell everybody what we got going over here. And until we meet again, everyone, may you be happy. May you be healthy, and may you be whole. Rick, have a good night. And shout out to Wendy Cherry for producing an incredible show tonight.
Yes, thanks, Wendy. Thank you, Gina. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
I wanna know ya, Cameroon, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, gotta let me show ya, Nigeria, Bioko Island.